Minecraft horror story, The Forbidden Ritual. Steve broke the last deep slate block just before sunset, and the wall breathed at him. It was not the hiss of lava or the low groan of a cave. It was a slow breath, deep and tired, coming through a square hole where solid stone should have been. Steve raised his torch. Beyond the hole stood a narrow room made from blocks he did not know. They looked like stone, but their surfaces moved in small waves, as if dark water had been trapped inside them. Jonah pushed past him with his iron pickaxe ready. That was not here yesterday. Nothing was here yesterday, Steve said. We dug this tunnel ourselves. Mara and Iris came down the mine behind them. The four had spent 36 days building Birch Hollow, a walled settlement above the cave. They had farms, an enchantment room, a storehouse, and enough beds for every villager they had rescued. The mine below it had been safe until silver ore began appearing among the deep slate. None of them had seen silver in a normal world, but Mara had already smelted 12 bright ingots and found that they would not stack with iron. The hidden room held a rough circle of black blocks. 4 dead candles stood around it. In the middle sat a single cube without a name. When Steve aimed his sight at it, no label appeared. The cube was dull red at first, then black, then red again. It pulsed at the same speed as the breath coming from the wall. At the far side of the room, a book rested on a lectern. Iris stepped closer. There are words in it. Do not read them, Steve said. She stopped. Jonah did not. He had always been the first to open a chest and the last to leave a cave. Before Steve could catch him, Jonah crossed the circle and placed one hand on the nameless cube. Every torch went out. For 1 second, the mine was silent. Then came a sound like a sword being dragged over stone. Red letters filled the dark in front of Steve. The search has ended. The torches relit by themselves. Jonah was on the floor outside the circle, though no one had seen him move. The book was gone from the lectern. It now sat in the first slot of Steve's hotbar. He tried to drop it. The book struck the floor and returned to his hand. Mara pulled Jonah up. What did you see? Jonah stared at the tunnel behind them. A man. Steve turned. The passage was empty. Where? Iris asked. At the top of the mine stairs. Jonah's voice was almost too low to hear. He was red. He was looking down at us. They left the room without taking anything. Mara sealed the opening with 3 layers of cobblestone, then placed an iron door over the tunnel and wired it to a lever only she could reach. Steve knew it would not be enough. The book stayed in his hotbar during the climb home. Its cover had once been brown. By the time they reached the mine entrance, red marks had spread across it like wet cracks. Outside, the square sun touched the forest. Birch Hollow looked exactly as they had left it. Villagers crossed the paths, smoke rose from 2 chimneys, and the iron golem stood beside the bell. Yet every animal in the fenced field faced the mine entrance. Cows, sheep, pigs, and chickens watched the 4 players emerge. None made a sound. Then the village bell rang once. No one stood near it. The first night began with footsteps on Steve's roof. He was in the map room with Mara, Jonah, and Iris when the sound moved from one end of the house to the other. Each step was slow and heavy. Dust fell between the oak planks. Mara took her diamond axe and climbed the ladder to the upper floor. Steve followed with a shield raised. The roof was empty. They searched every room. The doors were locked, the windows were whole, no mob stood inside the wall, and the iron golem still guarded the gate. When they returned to the map room, the book lay open on the table. No one had placed it there. The first page showed a drawing of 5 block figures. 4 stood together. The 5th was much taller and had arms stained black. A line beneath the picture read, "You opened what was closed." The second page held a recipe. 2 iron ingots, 2 silver ingots, and redstone dust arranged as a cross. The third page held only 4 words. "He has your scent." Jonah backed away from the table. "We should leave the world." Mara looked at him. "And go where?" "Anywhere. The nether, the end, another seed." The book appeared in Steve's inventory, she said. "If this thing is tied to him, a portal may only give it a shorter road." Steve closed the book. "We make the item, then we return to the room and close whatever Jonah opened." Jonah looked at the floor. For a moment, Steve thought he would argue. Instead, Jonah said, "There is something I did not tell you." Before he could continue, every window turned red. It was not the sky. A dark liquid flowed down the outside of the glass, thick enough to hide the village. Iris moved toward the nearest pane, but Steve caught her arm. Something scraped along the wall outside. Mara whispered, "Do not open the door." The scraping reached the window. A square head rose slowly behind the red glass. Its skin looked burned down to layers of black and orange. One eye was a dark hole. The other shone like a coal. A black strip ran down its chest, surrounded by raw red marks. In its right hand, it held a broad blade that curved near the point. The evil hunter stood 1 block from Steve and watched him through the window. Iris covered her mouth. Jonah stepped backward until he struck the table. The hunter lifted its empty hand. 1 finger tapped the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The window broke inward. Steve raised his shield. Mara swung her axe, but the hunter was gone before the blade reached the opening. The red liquid vanished with it. Outside, the village paths were dry. The iron golem had not moved. They did not sleep. Mara spent the rest of the night placing tripwires, bells, and redstone lamps around the wall. Iris checked every villager house. Steve and Jonah went to the storehouse for the silver. The chest was empty. 12 silver ingots had been inside it. In their place lay 12 pieces of rotten flesh. Each one had been renamed with a number from 1 to 12. Jonah opened his inventory and went pale. His diamond pickaxe was gone. A wooden shovel sat in its slot with a new name: "Dig your own room." At dawn, the sun rose halfway and stopped. The world remained trapped in weak orange light. Shadows stretched east but never changed. Villagers gathered around the bell and would not trade. Beyond the wall, hostile mobs stood beneath the trees without burning. Zombies, skeletons, and spiders all faced away from Birch Hollow, staring deeper into the forest. Mara climbed the watchtower with a spyglass. She searched the tree line, then became very still. "Steve," she said, "you need to see this." At the edge of the loaded land, a red figure stood on top of a birch tree. Its arms pointed straight out from its sides. From that distance, it looked like a cross made from meat and fire. As Steve watched, the figure lowered one arm and pointed at him. The sun finished rising. The hunter vanished, and every hostile mob in the forest caught fire at once. Mara's traps had recorded nothing. They needed more silver. The 12 ingots had come from a side cave beneath the eastern hill, so Steve planned a second mining trip. Mara wanted everyone to remain together, but the villagers were growing restless and the farms still needed protection. They agreed that Steve and Jonah would mine while Mara and Iris guarded Birch Hollow. Before they left, Steve opened the book again. Its title had changed. It now called itself The Evil Book. New words filled the 4th page. The ground keeps what the house cannot. Below the line was a set of coordinates. They pointed to the hidden ritual room. Steve closed it. It wants us to go back. Then we do the opposite, Mara said. Get the silver and come straight home. The mine seemed normal for the first 100 blocks. Steve and Jonah followed their torch line through Deepslate, crossed an old bridge over a ravine, and reached the eastern cave. Silver shone in the walls like pale stars. They worked without talking. Every few seconds, Steve checked the tunnel behind them. At the 6th vein, they heard a pickaxe. The sound came from the other side of the cave wall. 3 strikes, a pause, then 3 more. Jonah gripped his tool. Mara and Iris did not follow us. Steve placed his ear against the stone. The next strike sounded directly beside his head. The block cracked without either of them touching it. Another cracked, then another. A square tunnel formed from the far side, 1 block at a time. There was no player at the end of it. There was only darkness and the sound of fast breathing. Steve pulled Jonah away. We have enough. They ran. The torch line went out ahead of them in order. 1 torch, then the next, then the next. Darkness racing toward the ravine. When it reached the bridge, red words appeared across Steve's sight. Do not turn around. Jonah turned around. The evil hunter was 4 blocks behind him. It did not run. Its feet moved at a walking pace, but the space between them closed faster than it should. Its burned head leaned to one side. The curved blade scraped the floor and threw orange sparks. Steve struck it with his diamond sword. The blade passed through its chest as if through smoke. No damage flashed. The hunter swung once. Steve blocked, but the blow threw him across the bridge. 2 hearts vanished from his health bar and did not return when he ate. Jonah pulled him up. Together they sprinted through the mine. The hunter broke every block they placed behind them. Cobblestone, deep slate, iron doors all burst apart with the same quick rhythm. It did not slow. They reached the stairs. Steve looked up and saw daylight at the top. Then his legs stopped. He could turn his head. He could move his hands. He could not take 1 step. A heavy beat filled the mine, louder than thunder and slower than a heartbeat. The edges of his sight went dark. Jonah ran back and tried to push him. Move! The hunter entered the torchlight below them. Steve opened his inventory. The silver ore sat in 3 stacks. His crafting table was there, but there was no time to place it. The recipe needed ingots anyway. The cross did not exist. All he had was a shield, a sword, and the evil book. He held up the book. The hunter stopped. For the first time it spoke. Its voice sounded like several hurt mobs breathing through the same mouth. Read the last page. Steve did not obey. Jonah seized the book and opened it. If it gets him moving, I will read anything. The last page held 1 sentence. 1 of 4 has already invited me. The hunter looked at Jonah. Steve's legs came free. He grabbed Jonah, and they ran into daylight while the creature remained on the stairs, watching them leave. Birch Hollow was quiet when they returned. Too quiet. The gate stood open. Mara's redstone lamps were dark, and all the villagers had gone inside their houses. Steve found Mara beside the bell with a loaded crossbow. Iris stood behind her, holding a map so tightly that its paper shook. "You were gone for 9 minutes," Mara said. Steve looked at the sun. It had barely moved. The chase below had felt much longer. "It came through the west wall while you were in the mine," Iris said. "It did not break anything. The blocks changed for it." She led them to the animal field. A doorway had appeared in the solid stone wall, but no stone lay on the ground. The wall had simply opened. Inside the field, every animal was dead. No items had dropped. On the grass, black blocks formed a line pointing towards Steve's house. Mara saw the missing hearts on Steve's bar. Food did not fix that? He shook his head. "Then we make the cross now." They carried the ore to the furnace room. Mara divided it between 8 furnaces, filled them with coal, and locked both doors. While the silver smelted, Steve made Jonah tell the truth. Jonah sat against the wall and stared at the fire. "I found a page in the abandoned mine shaft 12 days ago. It had the circle drawn on it and a set of words beneath it. I thought it was a joke placed by one of you." "What words?" Iris asked. "A promise. It said the hunter could find anything that had been taken from the world." Mara's face hardened. "What did you ask it to find?" Jonah took a long time to answer. "My brother." No one spoke. They knew Jonah had once built with a younger brother named Micah. During their first week in the world, Micah had gone into a cave and never returned. There had been no death message. His bed remained claimed, but his name no longer appeared in the player list. They had searched for days and found only his shield at the edge of an underground lake. "I read the promise out loud," Jonah continued. "Then the page burned away. Silver started showing up the next morning. I thought that meant the search had begun." Steve understood the shape of the tunnel now. Jonah had not told them to mine east because the ore was better. He had been leading them toward the coordinates on the page. "You used all of us to reach that room," Steve said. "I thought it would bring Micah back." It brought something. Mara removed the first silver ingot from a furnace. "And if we live through this, you can explain the rest later." She placed 2 iron ingots, 2 silver ingots, and redstone dust on a crafting table. The materials pulled together with a bright snap. A small metal cross appeared in the output slot. It was simple, no longer than Steve's hand, but its surface gave off white sparks. The moment Mara picked it up, every furnace died. The room became black. A woman began crying on the other side of the locked door. Iris whispered, "One of the villagers." Steve checked the player list. 4 names remained. The crying grew louder. It sounded close to the floor, as if someone knelt in the hall. "Please," a woman called. "He took my child." Jonah moved toward the door. Mara blocked him. "It knows what you want." "That is not Micah's voice." "It does not need to be." The handle turned. The iron door had no handle on that side, yet it opened one small step. Pale fingers curled around the edge. They were too long and had too many joints. Steve slammed the door with his shield. Mara pulled the lever. The lock caught. The crying stopped at once. A low laugh came from inside the furnace behind them. They fled through the second door. When Mara looked back, a white face watched from within the flames. She fired her crossbow. The bolt struck the back of the furnace, and the face broke into a cloud of ash. The event left one thing behind. Words had appeared over the workbench in black drops. The cross delays. The circle decides. They made 3 more crosses. That afternoon, they moved everyone into the meeting hall. Mara gave 1 cross to each player and kept the spare in a chest. Steve ordered the villagers into the lower room, then blocked the stair with iron. They removed every door from the hall because they had seen the hunter open them. They covered the windows with cobblestone and placed ladders to the roof as an escape. At sunset, the world began to flicker. For half a second, the meeting hall was normal. For the next half, the walls were made of red flesh. Oak planks became wet ribs. Torches became candles set in dark skulls. The change repeated again and again, faster each time. The villagers screamed below them. Steve saw himself standing in the far corner. The copy wore his blue shirt and purple trousers. Its square face had Steve's eyes, but its mouth was too wide. It copied every move he made 1 beat late. When Steve raised his sword, the copy raised an empty hand. When Steve stepped left, it stepped right. Iris aimed her bow. Which one is real? Do not shoot either of us, Steve said. The copy smiled. Do not shoot either of us. Mara held up the cross. White sparks crawled over it. The copy's smile vanished. It walked backward into the wall and passed through the blocks without sound. The flicker ended. The hall returned to oak and stone. Jonah checked the ladder. The roof is clear. Then Steve heard his own voice outside. Iris, I found Micah. Iris looked at Jonah. Jonah had said nothing. Again the voice called from the village square. He is by the gate. Hurry. Iris climbed the ladder before Steve could stop her. He followed and caught the edge of the roof in time to see her jump down. A second Steve stood near the gate, waving her closer. Iris, the real Steve shouted. She stopped halfway across the square. The copy's head turned all the way around while its body remained still. The evil hunter dropped from the watchtower behind it. The copy folded into a red stain. The hunter lifted its curved blade and charged. Steve jumped from the roof into a water trough. Mara and Jonah came down behind him. Iris ran toward them, but the ground under her feet split apart. A crack raced across the square, opening into a narrow, dark cut. Red hands reached up from it and caught her boots. Steve grabbed her arms. Jonah struck the hands with his pickaxe. They broke like weak blocks, but more appeared. The hunter closed the distance, moving with that same impossible speed. Mara raised the cross. Come closer, she said through clenched teeth. The hunter swung at her. She moved under the blade and drove the cross against its chest. Lightning struck the village square. The sound broke every remaining window in Birch Hollow. White light covered the hunter. Its body pulled apart into red and black pieces, each one drawn upward into the bolt. The curved blade fell last, but it vanished before touching the ground. The earth closed beneath Iris. The villagers stopped screaming. Where the hunter had stood, a small dark object floated above the grass. Steve picked it up. Its name appeared at once. Hunter's Soul. It looked like a heart made from black glass. Red smoke moved inside it. Each time Steve held it, one of his missing hearts flashed as if trying to return. Jonah let out a weak laugh. We did it. The evil book opened by itself. Page after page turned in a hard wind. New writing covered them. You banished the body. You kept the door. Make the spear. Return the soul. The final page showed a recipe built around the hunter's soul, gold in the upper corners, glass around the center, silver below. Beneath it was a drawing of the ritual circle. Mara looked at the damaged square. It wants us to finish what Jonah started. Or it wants its soul back, Iris said. Jonah watched the black heart floating over Steve's palm. If the hunter can find people taken from the world, Micah may be on the other side of that circle. Steve closed his fist around the soul. That promise brought this here. We are not trusting a second promise. They locked the soul inside an obsidian room beneath the meeting hall. Mara built 2 piston doors and set a different lever for each. Only Steve and Mara knew the order. The evil book remained with Steve because it refused every chest, hopper, and item frame. For 3 days, the hunter did not return. That silence did more harm than another attack. Jonah began asking to see the soul. Iris spent hours watching the gate. Mara checked her circuits until she could hardly keep her eyes open. Steve walked the wall and waited for a red figure to appear. Instead, Birch Hollow changed 1 block at a time. The first change appeared in the wheat field. A single dirt block became dark red and moved slightly when stepped on. Breaking it produced no item. By evening, 6 blocks around it had changed. The next morning, flesh covered half the farm and climbed the fence posts in thin strips. Then the water in the well turned black. Then every villager trade changed to the same offer, 1 heart for 1 empty map. Then Steve opened his food chest and found every loaf of bread renamed Last Meal. On the 4th night, the moon disappeared. The stars remained, but the square where the moon should have been was empty. A message appeared above Steve's hotbar. Phase 4. Something struck the wall outside. Mara ran to the western tower. Steve, Jonah, and Iris followed. At first they saw nothing, then a second blow hit the stone. Cracks spread across 6 blocks at once. The evil hunter stepped through the wall. The banishment had not slowed it. Its burned body was darker now, and white lines ran across its chest where the cross had touched it. It carried no blade. Both hands had changed into long black claws. It looked up at the 4 players and spoke 1 word. Soul. Mara raised her cross and fired its light. Nothing happened. The hunter climbed the tower wall without a ladder. Steve struck down at its hands, but his sword dealt no damage. Jonah poured a bucket of lava over the edge. The hunter walked through the lava and kept climbing, its body burning brighter. Iris ran for the opposite ladder. The ritual is the only door we have left. The hunter reached the top. Mara shoved Steve aside as a claw swept across the platform. It caught her chestplate and threw her through the wooden rail. She fell toward the square. A slime block from one of her old machines softened the fall, but her health dropped to 1 heart. Steve jumped after her. Jonah and Iris came down the inner ladder. The 4 ran to the meeting hall, while the hunter tore through the tower floor above them. Inside, the villagers were gone. The iron blocks sealing the lower room remained in place. Steve mined through one and looked down. 20 beds filled the room. Every bed was empty. On the far wall, a message had been carved into the stone. The circle needs witnesses. Jonah stared at the words. It took them to the altar. Then we go there, Steve said. Mara pressed a hand to her damaged armor. With what plan? Steve opened the evil book to the recipe. We give the circle what it asks for. Then we break it from inside. They had little time. The hunter had entered the meeting hall behind them and was moving through the upper rooms. Each footstep shook dust from the ceiling. Mara led the others through a storage tunnel that opened beneath the blacksmith's house. Steve blocked the passage with obsidian, knowing it might buy seconds and nothing more. The blacksmith's chests still held gold, redstone, lapis, iron, and the silver left from the furnaces. They crafted while impacts sounded under the floor. Mara made silver boots and a chest plate for Steve. There was not enough for a full set. She repaired her cross, though none of them knew why it had failed. Iris surrounded the hunter's soul with glass, silver, and gold. When she lifted the result from the table, the red smoke inside the soul spread through the glass. The blood sphere was warm enough to hurt her hands. Jonah built the ritual sword from the pattern in the evil book. Its blade looked plain until he held it. Blue symbols appeared along the silver edge, and fire ran from the guard to the point without burning him. "It chose you," Iris said. Jonah shook his head and gave the sword to Steve. The symbols faded. "No, I opened this. That is different from being chosen." The obsidian at the end of the tunnel broke. They ran from the blacksmith's rear door. Birch Hollow no longer looked like their home. Flesh covered the paths. The houses leaned at angles that normal blocks could not hold. Parts of the wall floated above the ground. Through gaps in the world, Steve saw a red sky below the bedrock. The hunter stepped into the square. Its claws dragged through the flesh and left burning lines. Steve held up the blood sphere. The creature stopped. Its coal-bright eye followed the smoke turning inside the glass. "You want this?" Steve called. "Follow us." They ran for the mine. The hunter did not chase at first. It walked behind them, never more than 20 blocks away. When they reached the mine stairs, it spread its arms and blocked the setting sun. The image was the same one Steve had seen above the trees, a human cross burned red and black. In the tunnel, the damage was worse. Blocks vanished as Steve looked at them. The ravine bridge stretched far beyond its real length, then became short again. Phantom footsteps ran beside the group on the walls. Ink dripped from the ceiling, but each drop rose before it struck the floor. Iris began counting their turns. Left, right, left, stairs, bridge. "We know the route," Jonah said. "The route is changing." She pointed ahead. Their torch line turned right where the tunnel should have gone left. Mara placed redstone dust at each crossing. The glowing line bent toward the ritual room even when laid in another direction. The world itself was guiding them. They reached the iron door. It hung open. The 3 layers of cobblestone behind it had become air. The ritual room was larger than before. The walls had moved back to form a round chamber, at least 50 blocks wide. Dark stone rose in steps around the central circle. The missing villagers stood on those steps. Their arms hung straight down, and their eyes were black. At the center, the nameless cube pulsed. Mara searched the chamber. There are more than 20 villagers. Steve counted. 32 figures stood around the altar. Some wore the clothes of farmers and toolsmiths from Birch Hollow. Others wore torn armor from settlements Steve had never seen. A few were players with faded skins, their bodies partly clear. Jonah pushed between them. Micah? One of the pale player shapes lifted its head. It wore a green coat and carried a shield with a white circle, the same pattern Micah had used. Jonah, it whispered. Jonah ran toward it. Steve caught him by the shoulder. That could be another copy. He knows my name. The hunter knows all our names. Micah's shape held out one hand. You found me. Behind them, the iron door slammed. The evil hunter stood against it. Words appeared above the altar. Return what was taken. Iris handed the blood sphere to Steve. If we wait, it kills us here. Steve stepped into the circle. The nameless block beat under his feet. He could feel each pulse in his missing hearts. The sphere pulled toward it so strongly that he needed both hands to keep hold. He looked back at his friends. Mara raised her repaired cross. Iris set 3 stacks of arrows in her hotbar. Jonah watched Micah and cried without making a sound. Steve pressed the sphere against the block. The chamber vanished. He landed on a flat field beneath a black sky. The ritual altar stood behind him, and a ring of white fire surrounded it. Mara, Jonah, and Iris appeared beside him. The villagers and lost players formed a second ring farther out. A bright cross appeared in Mara's hands. It was larger than the one she had crafted and shone blue at the edges. The evil book called it the True Cross. Then the shadows began to move. They peeled away from the villagers' feet. Each shadow rose into a thin black figure and walked toward the altar. A timer appeared above Steve's hotbar, 90 seconds. Beneath it, 3 empty marks waited. Mara understood first. She aimed the true cross at the closest shadow. White lightning struck it, and the figure broke into smoke. "Do not let them touch the block," she shouted. Iris fired arrows, but they passed through the shadows. Steve's sword did the same, only Mara could stop them. Steve and Iris ran the outer ring, calling directions. Jonah stood near Micah's pale shape and refused to move. 2 from the north, Iris shouted. Mara turned and destroyed one. The second reached the fire ring. Steve blocked its path, but it passed through him. Cold filled his body, and another half-heart disappeared from his maximum health. The shadow touched the altar. 1 empty mark turned red. "Jonah, help us watch," Steve called. Micah spoke before Jonah could answer. "If the ritual ends, I go back into the wall." "He is lying," Mara said. "You do not know that." Jonah drew his iron sword and stood between Micah and the altar. More shadows rose. Mara fired the cross again and again. Each strike lit the black field for 1 sharp second. In those flashes, Steve saw the evil hunter beyond the outer ring. It walked around them with its head bent, waiting for the timer to end. 30 seconds remained. 4 shadows approached from different sides. Iris called the first, Steve called the second. Mara destroyed both, then turned toward the third. Jonah stepped into her path. "Let one through," he said. "The book says return what was taken. Maybe it needs one more." 2 marks end the ritual," Mara answered. "You do not know what happens at 3. The third shadow passed them and touched the altar. The second mark turned red. Mara struck Jonah with the side of the true cross. He fell. She destroyed the fourth shadow 1 block from the fire. The timer reached 0. Every remaining shadow dropped flat. The white fire changed to red. A long bar appeared across the top of Steve's sight. Hunter. The evil hunter entered the ring. Its curved blade had returned. The body looked more solid than before, built from burned red flesh around a black center. Fire moved under the skin of its square head. It pointed the blade at Steve. The ritual sword ignited in Steve's hand. The hunter rushed him. Steve rolled aside and cut across its arm. This time the sword struck. The hunter flashed white, and the bar dropped slightly. It turned faster than any normal mob and drove its shoulder into him. His silver chestplate took the hit, but the force threw him into the fire ring. Iris pulled him away before the flames could hold him. Mara used the true cross, but its light no longer harmed the hunter. "Only the sword," Steve said. He attacked again. He kept moving in a wide circle, striking once, raising his shield, then moving before the hunter answered. Each hit set the creature on fire. The flames did not make it weaker. They made its face easier to see. There were faces inside its face. Each orange patch became an eye or an open mouth for a moment. Steve saw villagers, lost players, and animals caught beneath the burned skin. Their shapes pushed outward and sank back. "It is carrying them," Iris said. Jonah looked at Micah. The pale shape outside the ring flickered whenever the hunter took damage. "Stop!" Jonah grabbed Steve's sword arm. "You are hurting all of them." The hunter's blade came down. Steve tore free. Jonah did not move in time. The strike cut through his iron chestplate and drove him to the ground. His health bar emptied in a single flash. No death message appeared. Micah's pale shape opened its arms. Jonah's body slid across the field toward it, leaving no items behind. When they touched, both figures folded into the hunter's chest. A new face burned across its shoulder. Jonah's face. Steve attacked with everything he had. The ritual sword cut the hunter's chest, arm, leg, then chest again. The boss bar fell to half. The creature vanished. Red words crossed Steve's sight. "Dodge." Fire rose from the ground beneath him. He jumped away. 3 red bolts came from the dark and crossed where his head had been. More lights spiraled inward from the edges of the field. Steve, Mara, and Iris ran between them, but the attacks came faster with every second. Iris took 1 bolt in the back. Her armor broke. She fell to 2 hearts. Mara threw a healing potion, but it changed in the air. The bottle became black and burst at Iris's feet. Poison spread around her. Steve dragged Iris out of the cloud. "Stay behind the altar." "There is no behind," she said. She was right. The altar turned to face them no matter where they stood. The timer for the attack showed 10 seconds. Fire opened beneath Mara. A spiral of bolts closed around Iris. Steve could reach only 1. He ran to Iris and blocked the first bolt with his shield. The second broke it. The third struck Iris in the chest. She disappeared without dropping an item. Her name remained in the player list for 1 more second. Then it turned red and vanished. Mara survived the fire with half a heart. The timer ended. The evil hunter returned beside the altar. 5 shadows moved around it in a circle, and a grey light covered its body. Steve struck with the ritual sword. The blade bounced away. "The shadows are its shield," Mara said. She raised the true cross with both hands. Her first lightning strike destroyed one shadow. The hunter slashed her back before she could turn to the second. Steve drew its attention, circling with the sword and avoiding the blade. Mara destroyed a second shadow, then a third. Each one released a different voice: a villager, a child, Jonah, Iris. The fourth shadow moved behind the hunter. Mara stepped close enough to aim. The hunter caught her by the throat. It lifted her from the ground. Its burned face touched hers. "Builder," it said, "build me a door." Mara looked past it at Steve. Her hand opened and the true cross fell. Steve slid under the hunter's arm, caught the cross and used it on the fourth shadow. Lightning struck close enough to blind him. The hunter threw Mara into the outer ring. The pale figures seized her and held her upright. One shadow remained. It circled behind the altar, wearing Micah's shape. Steve aimed the cross. The shadow looked at him with a frightened face. "Please," it said, "I am still here." The hunter walked toward Mara. Steve remembered the sentence in the mine. One of 4 had already invited it. Jonah had thought the words meant betrayal. Now Steve understood. An invitation was not a chain. It was bait. The hunter had used Micah's shape because Jonah wanted to see it. Steve fired the cross. Micah's shadow broke apart. The grey shield vanished from the hunter. Mara fell free. Steve switched to the ritual sword and struck the creature across the back. The boss bar dropped again. The hunter turned, but Steve kept attacking. Fire covered them both. His silver armor broke piece by piece. At 30 health, the creature dropped its blade and staggered toward the altar. Something rose from the nameless block. It looked like a player made from white light. The evil book gave it one name: Saver. The saver reached for the hunter. Mara shouted, "Steve, look at the villagers." Every pale figure in the outer ring was bending toward the white player. Their bodies stretched into lines of light and flowed into it. The saver was not freeing them. It was feeding on them. The hunter tried to crawl away. For the first time, the creature looked afraid. The saver placed one bright hand on the hunter's head. The burned skin began to peel away in square pieces. Beneath it was not bone. Steve saw the face of a player he did not know, a young man with grey eyes and a torn yellow shirt. He appeared for only a moment before more red flesh closed over him. Words filled the sky. The old hunter is accepted. The new hunter must be named. The saver turned toward Steve. Mara understood before he did. The ritual does not kill it, it replaces it. The white figure raised its other hand. The ritual sword pulled against Steve's grip. He held on, but the weapon dragged him toward the altar. Every voice in the outer ring spoke at once. Finish it. Take the reward. End the night. The evil book floated out of Steve's inventory and opened above the nameless block. Its pages showed a new picture. The saver stood over a dead hunter. Beside it, a second burned creature rose with Steve's face visible beneath the fire. Jonah had not called a monster into their world. He had opened a ritual that needed a survivor. It hunted a group until one person remained, then turned that person into the next hunter. The promise to find the lost was how it gathered people willing to enter the circle. The hunter grabbed the saver's arm. White fire ran over its claws. It screamed, but it did not let go. Steve saw hundreds of black marks across the nameless block, each shaped like a player name. The burned creature had once reached this stage too. It had fought, survived, and taken the false victory. That did not make it innocent. The faces in its skin proved how many it had killed, but its fear gave Steve one last chance. "Mara," he called. The first cross only delayed it. The true cross breaks the shield. What happens if we use it on the block? We find out. She ran for the altar. The pale figures caught at her armor. Steve cut through their arms with the ritual sword. They broke into smoke and rebuilt behind him. The saver threw the hunter aside. It landed near the fire ring, body split across the chest. The white figure reached for Steve. Mara struck the nameless block with the true cross. Lightning did not come from the sky, it came from below. A white crack split the altar and raced across the black field. The outer ring shook. The pale figures released a single cry. The evil book slammed shut. The saver's light flickered. For one moment, its smooth face became clear. It wore Jonah's face, then Iris's, then Micah's, then dozens of others. It was made from every person offered to the circle. Steve drove the ritual sword into the crack. The nameless block screamed. The sound was so loud that his health fell to one heart. Mara dropped the cross and covered her ears. The sky broke into square holes. Through them, Steve saw the real ritual room, its dark walls waiting beyond the false field. The saver rushed him. The evil hunter moved first. It caught the white figure from behind and locked both arms around it. Light burned through the creature's chest, but it held the saver over the cracked altar. "Now," it said. Steve pushed the sword deeper. The block shattered. The black field folded toward the broken altar. White fire, shadows, villagers, and the outer ring stretched into thin lines. Mara caught Steve's arm. The pull lifted them from the ground and dragged them toward the center. The hunter and saver went into the crack together. As the burned head disappeared, the gray-eyed player beneath its skin looked directly at Steve. He did not ask for help. He only closed his eyes. Mara's grip slipped. Steve caught her wrist with both hands. Their armor, tools, and food flew into the broken block. Mara struck the ground with her free hand, trying to hold a block edge. "Do not let go," Steve said. "I am trying not to." The evil book swept past them. Mara seized it from the air and looked at the red cover. Then she looked at the crack. "It needs the invitation," she said. She threw the book into the center. The pull doubled. Her wrist slid through Steve's hands. Mara fell toward the altar. Steve jumped after her, but a wall of white light struck him and threw him through one of the holes in the sky. The last thing he saw was Mara turning in the air, the true cross shining in one hand as she vanished beside the book. Steve woke on the floor of the original chamber. The room had returned to its first size. The candles were gone. The circle was ordinary blackstone, and a hole 2 blocks deep marked the place where the nameless cube had been. No portal moved inside it. No light remained. Steve was alone. Mara, Jonah, and Iris were absent from the player list. The villagers were gone as well. His inventory held only one item, a silver sword with a white blade. It had no durability bar. The name read True Silver Sword. He searched the room for hours. He mined every wall, the floor and the ceiling. He found no hidden passage and no dropped item. At the point where Mara had disappeared, one word had been cut into the black stone. Closed. Steve climbed to Birch Hollow. Morning had come. The flesh blocks were dirt again. The well held clean water, and the houses stood at proper angles. Damage from the attacks remained. The western tower had collapsed. Glass covered the meeting hall floor. The field was empty, and wind moved through wheat no villager would harvest. He rang the bell until its sound faded into the forest. No one answered. For the next 7 days, Steve looked for survivors. He searched every house, cave, hill, and riverbank. He returned to the ritual chamber each night. It stayed empty. The evil book did not come back. Phantom footsteps did not follow him. His missing hearts slowly returned until his health bar was whole. On the 8th day, he buried 3 empty chests beneath the village tree. He placed Jonah's spare pickaxe in the first, Iris's maps in the second, and Mara's redstone torch in the third. He built stone markers over them and left the spaces between the markers open for the villagers whose names he had never learned. Then Steve sealed the mine. He filled the main shaft from bedrock to the surface, layer after layer, mixing stone with obsidian so no straight path remained. He broke the entrance and covered it with dirt. On top, he planted 4 birch trees. The true silver sword stayed in his hotbar. Weeks passed. Steve repaired one house, replanted the field, and lit every path. Traders began visiting again. 2 villagers arrived from a distant settlement and chose empty beds. Birch Hollow started to make ordinary sounds, doors opening, crops breaking, an iron golem walking over stone. Steve never went underground after dark. One rainy evening, he found a child villager standing between the 4 birch trees. The child held a brown book. Steve drew the silver sword and approached slowly. The book was a normal blank journal. Only 1 page had writing on it. The letters were small and sharp, formed with redstone dust. You closed your door. I closed mine. Beneath the words was a simple drawing of a redstone torch. Steve looked toward the forest. Far beyond the wall, lightning flashed. For an instant, a figure stood among the birch trunks. It was the right height to be Mara. It held a bright cross at its side. Its skin was not burned, and no blade hung from its hand. Then the darkness returned, and the figure was gone. Steve did not follow. He carried the child back to the village, placed the blank book in the chest beneath Mara's marker, and covered it with stone. Before sunrise, he built one final lamp over the sealed mine. The lamp stayed dark for the rest of the night. At dawn, it turned on by itself. Steve stood beneath it with the true silver sword lowered at his side. The world was quiet, the sun moved, and nothing watched from the trees. He knew the people taken by the circle might never return. He also knew the door beneath Birch Hollow was closed. So he went back to the wheat field and began repairing what the forbidden ritual had left behind.